Hi, I'm Brent Hastaker, website consultant with NetSource Technologies, and today I am here with Derek Heron, one of our designers here at NetSource. And I brought Derek here to join me in a discussion on image file types, because whenever we've got a new project that we're doing for a customer, we're doing a new website for them, one of the first things that we're going to ask them is, hey, do you have the image files for like your logo and different photos and things like that that you want used on the website. So image files are really important for us because we want to make sure we're getting the correct ones, to be able to have the proper, final output for the website, have it look as good as it can. So before we get started on that real quickly, I'm going to introduce Derek, let him just tell you a little bit about himself and what he does here at NetSource Technologies.
Hi, I'm Derek. I'm a graphic designer here. I handle web design and I also handle any of the print design as well. I've been doing graphic design work for the past 15 years throughout print industry and web industry. So I have a vast knowledge of both sides of the equation.
Okay, great. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off and I'm just going to have you tell us a little bit about the difference between production files and rendered files. And before you actually start, I've got my handy dandy little chart here. Isn't this cool? These are the files that we're going to be talking about here. I'm not trying to get over your face here. But so we've got our image files across the top here. We've got JPEG, we've got AI file, we've got EPS, TIFF, and PSD. These are the production files that we might typically ask of you if you have those. And then other files that you might be familiar with are JPEG, GIF, PNG, PDF, and then occasionally, although it's very rare, you might see some stuff like SVG or WebP. So go ahead and just tell us a little bit about these files and how they differ and what they need to know about.
Sure, we'll start with the production files. The production files would basically be the program that you're using to create your file, whether it be your logo, whether it be the image, your digital camera. Let's start with your digital camera. Most digital cameras will save it in JPEG, or you can also have the option of saving the file in RAW. RAW gives you more information that can be used to edit the photo once you get into a program such as Photoshop, which is the PSD file that we showed up just a second ago. Photoshop file is a raster-based program, which means it uses pixels to create your image. So whatever you start out with is going to be your highest quality. So when you open up your document and you start that out, whether it be from your image or from your camera, or if you're just starting a blank document and adding text or graphics to it, that resolution is set right there as a DPI. Print resolution would be 300 DPI, web resolution would be 72 DPI, because print is using a lot more dots per inch to create that file, whereas the screen is using a less DPI. That's why you can get away with a lower on web images and stuff. But with the raster program, you're going to be whatever that file size that you started out with. I said earlier that's going to be your biggest you're going to get. Anything, if you ever try to enlarge that file from your start, you're going to lose quality. If you go down, you're okay, but if you go up, you're going to lose quality. There's another program for different type of files, which is Illustrator. There's other programs that use that work the same way, such as CorelDRAW. They're using a vector based program, and what vector is it creates your image. It doesn't actually do photographs in vector. You can put a photograph into a vector program, however it's going to stay as a raster pixel image. The vector, what it does is it actually uses a mathematical equation to create your image. So if you have a logo and you've created it in a vector art, no matter how big you blow that up, you're never going to lose resolution. You could put it the size of a building if it's vector graphics. It's just using that mathematical equation to recreate that at the larger size.
So those vector images that he's talking about, that's something that you want to have like your logo
Correct,
in that
your
format
logo.
because then if you've got a copy of that file that a developer has created for you, then you can use that, when a web developer asks for that logo, you can give him that file and he can do what he needs with it. If you're getting a billboard done and you need it gigantic, 10 feet wide or whatever, you can give it to the billboard company and they can blow it up to that proper size, and it's always going to look the best it can,
yes.
because it's in a format that can expand back and forth however it needs.
And on the
to.
chart that we showed earlier, the AI file is the Adobe Illustrator program. Also on that list that he had earlier was the EPS. EPSs can hold vector images, but you can also put raster images into it. So from our standpoint, sometimes when we get an EPS, it's not necessarily a vector file, but EPS will hold vector files.
Okay.
And PDFs as well.
Right. So there is some crossover, but really the most common format for, like, say, a logo that you're going to want it from is, I'm going to guess, going to be an AI or
an AI
EPS.
file. Yes. The good thing about the PDF and the EPS is when you export the file from Adobe Illustrator, when you go to your PDF settings and your EPS settings, you can do what's called as converting the text to outlines.
Okay.
Because if you send me an AI file and you put your font in there and you didn't convert the font to an outline, then I get that AI file. If I don't have that font on my computer, then it's going to substitute it with whatever font is on my computer. Okay. So then your logo is going to change. But when you're exporting as EPS and PDF, there's actually options in the export to convert all text to outlines. And then that way we never have to worry about a text.
So it's really kind of the finished file that you can then work with as needed. Okay, so the EPS and
the PDF,
are two good file formats to have your logo in a vector format. As for other images and things like that on your site, I'm going to guess a JPEG is most likely what you're going to want to use. And you probably have noticed the JPEG is both a production file at the beginning here. Oops, wrong hand. And it's also a final rendered file, because you're probably familiar with JPEGs. They're all over the internet. But how come a JPEG is also a production file and a rendered file, and how you're requesting a JPEG file, but then sometimes you give us a JPEG file, the client does, and we say, oh, well, that's not the right kind of JPEG, or it doesn't work. Tell us a little bit more about that.
A JPEG can hold a lot of information, but it is also a compressed file. It can hold millions of colors, like a photograph has millions of colors. So if you have a JPEG shot with your digital camera with a large megapixel, you could have that photo as a very large file. You can also take that photo as a JPEG and size it down to a size of a penny, and then you've lost a lot. And you've lost a lot of your resolution. Not necessarily your resolution. You can have a very fine printed image at the JPEG if it's saved right at the penny size. But sometimes if you compress that file that size, then it's not really usable for the web.
Right. And so you take a JPEG, your original, and then a lot of times when you compress it down to smaller, now it's a smaller file, and then we get that smaller file, and then we want to use it bigger on the website. Now all of a sudden that pixelation happens. So that's why the JPEG, we always are going to ask for the highest resolution or the original version of the JPEG file that comes from a camera. Right,
yes. The more resolution we have, the better off we are, because we can, like I said earlier, you can always go smaller. Going larger is when you start to have issues.
Right, exactly. So I guess to summarize so far right now, your logos, EPS, PDF format is going to be good.
Logos can be created in Illustrator. You can also create logos in Photoshop. However, like I said before, whatever size you're starting with, that's going to be your max size.
So if you start on an image this big on your computer screen and now you want to put on a billboard, it's probably going to look pretty crummy.
Possibly, yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's see what other questions I might have here for you. This is a good question we get a lot, and people say, well, can't you just scan my logo, for example, off my business card? Tell us a little bit about that and why that's such a terrible idea.
There are multiple reasons with that. Is every scanner is going to interpret color differently, and you're going to get a color shift right off the bat with the scanner. So what's going to happen is you're going to have first of all, let's take a step back on this.
Okay.
When your card is printed, it is printed using a process called CMYK, or could be Pantone colors. It's actually using inks. Inks show color differently than your monitors, your RGB.
Right.
So first of all, you've created your logo and you're looking at it on your computer screen. Well, when you've printed it, you've already had a color change. You can work with different ways to get that to really look like what you're seeing on your computer. But now what happens is now we've taken this CMYK and I'm going to scan it in and convert it back to RGB for the computer, and we're going to get a color shift. Also, you're going to, the scanner is also going to pick up all the little dots that are used to create that image when it's being printed, especially if it's a commercial press. If you ever get like a big magnifying glass and look at something that's been commercially printed, it's all little dots next to each other to create that image. So when you scan it in, the scanner is going to read all those dots, and you're going to actually see that dot pattern on your logo.
Right. You're also going to see all the dust and everything else that's on the paper, or the texture of the paper, which comes through, especially on a business card. Of course, you're scanning from a very small logo on a business card too, which, again, following that principle we talked about earlier, whatever the smallest you start with, you try to blow that up, it's going to look terrible. And even if you had it on a larger piece of paper like this, still you're getting a downgraded image.
You're getting a downgraded image, and there's just a lot of things that you can run into, and it also will slow down the process as well. Right.
Now, when a lot of times too, when we ask for an image file from a customer for their logo or different things like that, a lot of times they'll say, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't have a copy of our logo, but somebody does, because they've got, business cards printed up. They've got letterhead. They might have a sign for their business. They've got it somewhere. And so this is just kind of basically saying, hey, make sure whoever has your logo that you get a copy of that.
Correct.
So a lot of times when we're talking to a customer, we'll help them track down their logo and their digital files, and then definitely tell them, hey, it's a good idea to keep a backup copy, because really that's your business, one of your business assets.
Right, it is. And what's going to happen is if you need to get something even outside of web, if you need to get something, you need some business cards printed, hey, your printer went out of business. If your printer is holding that file and that printer goes out of business and you didn't get that file before, it's gone. Yeah. So you need to keep a copy yourself on your computer and also on a cloud device such as Dropbox, so that you have multiple access points to that file.
Right. Yeah, there's so many different services out there, because you don't just want to keep it on your local computer, because your local computer crashes and then your logo's gone again.
Yes.
And with all the different services that are out there now, there's really no excuse not to have it out there somewhere in the cloud. Like you said, Dropbox is a great service. Evernote, Google's got their online drive. You've got Microsoft, everybody's
and you
got,
even have those companies that will back up your whole computer.
Exactly. So I mean, there's tons of these companies out there. So
make sure you have a backup.
Make sure you have a backup. Yeah. And also, if you're not comfortable with cloud, having it out there in the cloud, which really everyone does now, but you can still put it on save it on a CD or DVD, go put it in a bank, what do you call it?
Safety deposit box. Yes.
Just don't forget that you have it, because that's the other thing, is people will have a copy of their digital files, but they just won't remember
where they put it.
But anyway, definitely have a backup. Yes. If we're ever producing because we do logo development too, if we're doing logo development for you, that's something that we do provide. We provide a backup of all your digital files to you. We provide that on a CD so that you do have
and the different formats, the production and rendered
what
files.
We talked about. Exactly. So you'd have the original production file that somebody else could be able to do something with. If another developer or a sign company or something like that needed to do some tweaks, they would have those original files, but you'd also have all the other files you need for output to the different services that you might need it for. Anything else that you feel we need to go over?
We kind of went over the production files, but we really didn't get too much into the rendered files.
Okay, I'll hold this up again.
The rendered files are on the bottom row here. These are the type of files that you will actually see being used on your website. There's a couple different ones, and each one has its own benefits. We've already went over the JPEG. Like I said earlier, JPEGs can hold millions of colors. They're great for photographs. JPEGs do not have transparency. So if you ever seen some sites, or with your site, if you have your logo up on the top and there's a color background, and sometimes you'll see that white box around it. Well, that's because there's no transparency in that file. That is sometimes it could be, there's multiple file formats that don't hold transparencies.
Okay.
And do hold transparencies, but JPEGs do not hold transparencies. So therefore, if you're using a JPEG, it needs to be the full photo, or if it has to have a white background behind it.
Right.
Or you can try to color match the files as well, but that can get a little tricky.
Yeah, sometimes if you've been on websites and you might see like a little box around the logo that's a different color from the background. That's probably because it's
they were
a JPEG. They were trying to match, just plop it on there, and
it didn't.
Yeah, they didn't have the transparency to match.
And the funny thing is with that is some people's monitors will show those slightly different.
Exactly.
So then you might look good on your monitor, but someone else's monitor might see that differently.
Because the contrast settings on the monitor will bring in and out different colors differently.
Yes.
What was the next one?
The next one is GIF? The GIF. That one, GIF. It's a debate. People say whatever.
I've always called it GIF because it's GIF is a peanut butter.
Exactly.
It's with a J, so I call it a GIF. But I know that I think more commonly GIF is probably what most.
Well, and I think the creator calls it GIF.
Yeah.
The creator actually made the file format.
But he's wrong.
But yeah, he's wrong. I'm going to go GIF. Now, GIFs are a little different. They only hold 256 colors.
Okay.
So you're not going to get the high quality, crisp photograph out of GIF.
Right.
But they hold 1-bit transparencies.
Okay.
And what that means is you can choose one color in the file to be transparent. So the white background, you can choose that to be transparent. So they do work well for logos.
Okay.
Especially logos that have are nice clean shapes. If you get a little organic shape, you can get some pixelations around the edge because they're only using 256 colors. You're not going to get that smooth transition. Right. But if your logo's an oval, you can use it. They get
nice and clean.
Nice and clean, and they're a little bit smaller file size as well. They do hold animation though. So
that's what else they're good for is animated cat videos.
Right, animated cat videos. Great
whatever.
video format for the GIF.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is one nice aspect of that file.
Okay.
The PNG. This is a nice little file. I love this file because it holds full transparencies, full alpha channels, all the way from 0 to 100%. You can choose how much you want to be transparent of the image. Put gradient transparencies over these, and they will show on your website properly. They will hold all the millions. There's actually 2 versions of the PNG. There is the millions of colors, and there's also the 256. But they work great for logos because we can then use your logo and put any background image we need behind it, any color field or whatever, and it's going to look clean, it's going to look crisp, it's going to look nice. PNGs are not as destructive. JPEGs will compress your image. So if you have a file and you save that as a JPEG, you open it up again, make some changes, save it as a JPEG, you're losing compression each time. All right. So
it's like making a photocopy.
Yeah, it's like making a photocopy. Each time you do it, it's going to get worse. Now you can open the file and close the file. It's not going to compress. But if you make a change,
you save
it, you're compressing that file. And each time you do that, you lose bits and pieces of information in the file. PNG is not that way. PNG, you can make changes, resave. You're not going to lose that.
Cool.
So that's why I like PNGs. And you'll see a lot of the logos on the sites, on the actual finished production site. When you go to look at that, if you were to right click and save that image, it's most likely going to be a PNG.
Right. Yeah. PNG's kind of, I think, cut into the, I guess, market share, you could say, of JPEGs over the last 10 or so years, I guess.
Yes, they have. They do tend to be a little bit larger file size. So especially if you're just like an image, if you have like a little image gallery, a bunch of images, you probably want to use the JPEG because you can get them smaller. You can compress those down for the web and get your pages to load faster, as opposed to having all your photos as PNGs.
Okay.
So there are benefits of both.
Right. And then we've got, of course, our friend, the PDF.
The PDF, great for documents. The good thing about a PDF is whatever I see on my screen is most likely what you're going to see on your screen. It's a very compatible file.
Right.
So if you have a document, say you have a warranty guide for your website, lists all your warranty features or whatever, you can put all of your stuff in there. People are going to open it up and they're going to see it just the way you see it.
Right.
So they're good for those type of documents.
Right. Yeah. Anytime you want to have a document you want to put online that you want people to be able to print it off, PDF is always a good choice. All right. And then the crazy other ones like SVG and WebP. which really I don't see hardly at all.
No, the SVG
occasionally.
Yeah, the SVG is a nice file.
Yeah.
It's actually an XML based file.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of works like the vector,
Mm-hmm.
but in a computer sense. It will resize
Mm-hmm.
online, and you're not going to lose any of your resolution.
Okay.
You can take that file. It actually makes the code for the file using the little mathematical situation
Mm-hmm.
again type of thing. And we do a lot for icons,
Okay.
especially on our RV dealers when we have the flat icons. A lot of the times we'll use the SVG because they're actually searchable by Google. Like
Mhm.
it'll read all the information in that icon.
Okay.
So it has its benefits. They'll always stay clean and crisp. If you're viewing them, whatever size we decide to make your site or whatever, or if you're viewing it on different screen sizes, they're going to look nice and clean and crisp.
Okay. Okay. And then the WebP, that's like a Google.
Yeah, it's a Google file.
thing.
It's I'm not happy about that one yet.
Yeah.
You gotta
hasn't really caught on yet.
hasn't caught on, but
Yeah.
it also makes it difficult if we're trying to transfer
Mm-hmm.
because they appear nicely on the web, but actually having other programs that we would use to open them and edit them, we have to take that file and then we have to transfer it,
Okay.
and we have to transfer it into another file type before we can actually use it and edit it.
Got it. Okay.
But it's something Google's trying to do to
be Google.
be Google and make stuff better. And eventually it might actually catch on and work, but it's still in its early phases right now.
Right. Okay. So we won't worry too much about that
No.
one just yet. All right. Anything else?
I think that covered a lot of
Quite a bit.
information today.
Yeah, we did. So since we did cover a lot of information, again, just to summarize, if you've got a logo, make sure you've got that in a good vector format.
Correct.
Go ahead.
What some logos don't really handle, like if you have a photograph in your logo,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be able to really put that vector. Certain parts of it can be vector, but
Right.
then the photograph is not going to be vector.
Right.
In those situations, if you are using a photograph in your logo, you want to create that as high a resolution
Right.
as you can to start with. But
Right.
for the most part, logos will be vector.
Right, 95+%
Yeah.
of the time,
Correct.
we're going to have a vector. You're going to have a vector format for your logo, and you want to have that in probably a EPS or a PDF
Mhm.
version. And if you also can get the original file, like the AI file, if it was done in Adobe Illustrator, of that file, and have a copy of that, keep that copy.
Yes.
You can have it in your computer, but also make sure you keep it off site, like in the cloud somewhere or on a CD that's kept off site, and treat that as a digital asset for your company. It's an asset for your company. So make sure you always have
Yes.
a version of that file that you can use for whatever types of advertising that you're doing, whether it's with a web design company like us or anyone else. And then any photography that you're doing, make sure you've got it in a high quality JPEG format.
High resolution.
Yeah, the higher the better.
The higher the better.
And anybody who's doing any web design work for you or any kind of graphic work for you, putting together brochures for or magazine ads or anything else like that, print work, they're always going to be asking for that really high quality JPEG.
And the good thing about it, if you have the high quality, it can be used for everything.
Right.
If you're sitting there, if you got a file that, this is going to be my web file, this is going to be my print file, then you're going to have a bunch of files that then you have to store with. But if you just send us or
Mhm.
whoever the high resolution, then we can make the adjustments.
Right. And then when you're doing a website, we talked about the different the different rendered file formats out there. GIF is going to work good for a logo in a lot of cases.
Yes. And
J-
animations.
and animations. JPEGs are going to work well, of course, for any photography.
Mhm.
PNGs are also going to work good for logos
Mhm.
and occasionally for photography.
Photography, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then PDF or anything that you want to be able to put on your website that you want to make printable for people or keep it in a similar
Right.
format.
Mhm.
And I think that probably covers the majority, I think,
Right.
of what we were kind of talking about. So again, don't make a designer scan something off a piece of paper,
Correct.
because they're never going to get good quality off of that. Always make sure you've got digital files of all of your stuff.
Correct. And one thing that I did remember, we get a lot of requests a lot of time is, hey, my logo's already on my website. Can you use that?
Yes.
Well, Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It all
Mhm.
depends on how it was put on your original website.
Mhm.
Especially nowadays with the new responsive websites, we're looking to use a lot larger logo files than some of the older websites.
Right.
So if you have an older website, that logo might be too small to use. It might be embedded in a background image,
Right.
where then we would have to try to cut it out of the background image, and then you might see some of that
Right.
go into your new site. So if the logo's already on your site, it might be able to be used for your new site, but it would be better if we started with a high resolution file,
right.
because then we can make it the optimal size needed for your new site.
Exactly. Good point. Good point. So yeah, if your current site, and it might be in a different file format, it might have, it might be a JPEG that has a fade behind
Correct.
it, where they were trying to match another graphic on the site. Now we get that image file from you that we are expected to use on your website to put on it. It's now we're using a completely different background color, and now we've got that fade on there. We've got to take it out.
Yep.
And it can look a lot cleaner and better if we start from the original, crisp and clear.
Yep. You're going to get a better product if you start with the high resolution.
Exactly. So production files are the original files that we can work from, and then create those rendered files that we then put on your website. The production files is always what we're going to work from. The rendered files are the final output that we then use for your site. But anytime we need to make changes or do something new, we always want to go back to those original production files, start with those fresh files.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. All right, great.
All right.
Well, hey, thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for other videos that we're going to be doing here. And again, thank you.
Thank you.
We both thank you, and have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.